Well, we are about to talk with Jerry Martin, and he is the author of God, an Autobiography, as told to a philosopher. The voice announced, "I am God," for Jerry Martin. That encounter began a personal, intellectual, and spiritual adventure. He had not believed in God. He was a philosopher, trained to be skeptical, to doubt everything. So his first question was, is this really God talking? There were other urgent questions. What will my wife think? What would God want to talk to me? Why would he want to? Does God want me to do something? He began asking all the questions about life and death and ultimate things to which he and all of us have sought answers. Love and loss, happiness and suffering, good and evil, death and the afterlife, the world, religions, the ways God communicates with us, how to live in harmony with God. God, an Autobiography, tells the story of these mind-opening conversations with God. Jerry L. Martin was raised in a Christian family. By the time he left college, he was not a believer, but he was interested in the big questions, so he studied the great thinkers. He became a philosophy professor and served as head of the philosophy department in the University of Colorado at Boulder and of the National Endowment for the Humanities. He, in addition to scholarly articles on epistemology, the philosophy of mind, and public policy, he wrote reports on education and received national attention and was invited to testify before Congress. He stepped down from that career to write this book, and he lives in Pennsylvania and is a professor emeritus at Brooklyn College of the City University of New York. And we're happy to say that Jerry Martin is with us right now. And so let's say hi to Jerry. Hello, Jerry.
Well, hi, Gary. I'm very happy to be with you. I've been reading your Facebook, and everybody loves you.
Oh,
so
wow.
That's a nice credential.
Well, thank you very much. I'm glad that you're connecting with me on Facebook, and I notice you're also on Twitter. I saw that you wrote about being on the program today on Twitter. So thank you.
We spread the word.
Yeah, we do spread the word, and God and Autobiography. That sounds like, on the face of it, quite a task.
Well, it's strange, and I added the "as told to a philosopher" because I actually was given the title in prayer by the divine voice, as I understand it, and I thought, gee, that's kind of over the top. God in Autobiography, we don't have God on tape. It's all as told to me, and it's strange. It always seems to me you would have been a more likely recipient for this divine voice than I would have been. Probably any of your listeners would be, from the fact they're listening to this program. I was a lifelong agnostic, had a whole worldview, honed and developed and so forth, that didn't have even a God question in it. It was very naturalistic, and what you see is what you get. We live in reality, in this plane, you might say, of existence, and that's all there is. And but I did have occasion to pray.
Yes.
And there's a backstory there, if I can just briefly put it in.
Please.
I was having a great career, as you can tell from the nice introduction you gave me. But I'd been divorced for many years, and I'd not met Miss Wright. And then one day the phone rang. It was Abigail Rosenthal, a professor at Brooklyn College in New York. I was running a higher ed organization in Washington, D.C., and she said, "We have a big problem here," and she explained, "Can you help?" I said, "Yes, that's what we do." Well, it led to a months-long controversy. Was in all the New York papers. Abigail and I talked almost daily. It was all business, here. There's this report's going to come out, and this meeting's going to take place, this kind of thing. But I fell in love with her. On the phone, sight unseen. And then when I went to New York to give a talk about this, we did win the fight. She came, and my gosh, she was cute too. And I was prepared for anything. She had my heart already. But I thought, well, I've lucked out. And I courted her via Amtrak, going up from Washington to New York. And she loved me back, and I thought, I'm just the luckiest man in the world. I didn't believe anything, but I had just a welling up of gratitude and felt an urge to say a prayer of thanks, and I didn't see any reason not to express an authentic feeling. So I literally fell to my knees and gave a earnest prayer of thanks to whomever or whatever is out there. Just could be a benign universe, could be a God, could be a benign universe. I didn't worry about the belief component here. I was expressing a genuine feeling. About a month later, and this didn't change my beliefs. The fact that I have a momentary feeling doesn't mean I start believing new things about the universe.
Right.
But about a month later, we were facing the problem. We both had thriving careers, full-time, in two different cities. We wanted to make one life together. How on earth were we going to do that? And without forethought, because I still didn't have any beliefs, I actually prayed for guidance. And the first thing that can happen, and I wonder if for you or any of your listeners, they've had this kind of experience. First, it was what I think in old days they would have called a vision, a kind of hologram of a rising, sparkling, multicolored fountain. Obviously, kind of reassuring, that things are going to work out. A promissory note, you might say, that things are going to work out. And then a voice spoke.
Yes.
And I thought, this isn't me speaking.
Yeah.
And I kind of logic, I'm a logic professor, among others, and I think I just go through methodically. A voice is speaking, it's not me. And so I look over, Abigail's writing in her journal beside me. We're on a park bench on the south bank of the Potomac in the Washington, D.C. area. And she does not move, and so I wouldn't be surprised if she had heard the voice. I wasn't surprised that she didn't, because who knows how divine voices work. But I said, who is this? In my mind, I said, who is this? I am God. And, of course, I didn't know much about religion because that had never been an interest of mine, but I knew there are lots of them, and they have different gods, you might say. And I said, given reflecting my Christian background and culture, the God of Israel? I am the God of all, was the answer.
Now, did you hear it like you were hearing it from outside, or did you...
It seemed like from the outside, though often when I prayed, I subsequently would get a verbal answer, usually when I prayed, occasionally when I was not praying. And sometimes, I know one morning, it's so outside that I actually jumped when the voice spoke. I was just minding my own business, and it was like someone walking up behind you quietly and suddenly speaking, and you jump. And I was told, calm down, and God just had something to tell me. Often it's more like, listening on the phone, or having a little phone in my ear, or even God speaking in my mind, but it's not my thoughts. And occasionally one will see in the book when I'm praying along, I kind of pause and say, is this you, God, or is this just me thinking?
Right.
And this is one of the challenges of spiritual discernment, when it's just you and when it's really divine input into you. And I'm told, in fact, some of one's own thoughts that seem totally like yours are actually sort of implanted or nudged along or inspired, whatever the right language is, by the divine. But this led on, here I was a philosopher, and philosophers have questions. This is what we deal with, what is the meaning of this, what is the meaning of that? And so and of course I also ask about daily advice, and would often get orders back, do this, do that. But I had a lot of questions, and I thought, well, if I've got God on the line, this is my chance,
Right.
And so I just started asking the things that came to my mind, and as you can see in the book, the first questions are a lot about, well, I never believed in God, but I assumed that if there was a God, I knew what that description would be. I might say the job description of God would be, God would have to have these characteristics, and I asked, and sometimes I got yes, I have those, and sometimes I got no, or often I got, well, not exactly, and was kind of given a reformulated understanding of God that wasn't exactly, what I had grown up with. Later, as I came to read more, I saw there are a lot of subtleties in the various traditions, and in fact, I was guided in prayer to read at one point, well, I guess in a way the most dramatic earlier point in the book is one day when God spoke to me, God said, I want you to tell my story. Well, I'm thinking, hasn't your story been told already?
Right.
In my culture, I'm thinking of the Bible, but you could say that in any tradition, God's story has been told. And if I can, I'll just read exactly the words I received. It's a little bit longer than my other quotes, but
okay.
This is God to Jerry. Yes, but it's time for it to be told anew, and not in the same way. We are entering an unusual time in the history of the world. The old religions are coming apart, yet there is a renewal of religious spirit. The new spirituality is often aimless, made up, impressionistic, psychologized, sometimes flaky, and even dangerous and demonic. The purity of message must be regained. But there is gain here as well. The old revelations were limited. They fit the understanding of the people at the time. The messages were sometimes garbled or misunderstood or distorted over time. Also, I have evolved since then. So you can see that was quite a tall order.
Yeah.
And I had no idea what this would mean. In fact, I'm often in the book, you see, I always say the book. I should be saying the title of the book because people have only heard it once, God, an Autobiography. I often argue with God. Here I am, a philosopher with a worldview and a professor of logic, accustomed to clear and distinct answers, either or, either this or that. And so I argue with anything that doesn't make sense to me. And in this case, what I was supposed to do didn't make sense. God has a story. I mean, classic Christian theology, at least. God is eternal, unchanging, simple, unfeeling. Is a kind of self-contained entity that doesn't even make sense of thinking God is having a story.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, please.
How does God define itself?
Well, and just in response to my question, so
yeah.
That's a little too open-ended the way you put it. Depending on the context, with respect to what? No, let me think.
Okay, let me see.
What are you thinking?
Yeah. Okay. What does? Yeah. I mean, yeah. I'd like to know that the word God, God.
Yes.
Where did that? Is that a supreme being?
Yeah.
Is it? Where does it exist? And how? And what are its qualities?
Yeah.
I'll go there. Yeah.
Yeah. That's fine. God has many qualities. It's funny. I mentioned that a classical Christian theology characterized God as simple. Something comes out of Greek metaphysics, but the God I encounter is extremely complex and many-sided, and shows himself to the world in many different ways. And that's really a key to a lot of things. It's a key in part to why, if I can put it this way, I hope it doesn't make you uncomfortable, I feel God has given me a mission, and I've come to feel at least that many people have a divine mission, maybe everyone has a divine mission, and that you are carrying out, Gary, a divine mission in this program.
Yeah.
How could that not be understood that way? But your mission is not the same as mine.
Right.
And so God shows different sides of himself in different contexts. I'm also told, notice I use personal language. I notice one of On your Facebook, you wear a T-shirt that says Bhakti, which is the gives us access to the personal aspect of the divine. But I'm told, and I think these are literally God's words to Jerry, I am a person, but also much more than a person. And my sense of that is not just, as you sometimes in some theologies, the personal is an inferior understanding of something more supreme, more ethereal, more transcendent, less definable. But my sense, from what I've gotten in prayer, is that no, the personal is just as real as everything. In fact, I was told one cannot be, this is almost a quote from God to Jerry, one cannot be a person in some modes without being a person. So that seems an affirmation of the full reality of God's being a person. And that's one way we relate to him, or it or she, but not the only way. So that's one aspect. If you look at a lot of the classic theological alternative conceptions of God, for example, is God transcendent or immanent? In the Christian tradition, the creation story is taken as meaning God stands totally outside the world and then creates the world. But the version of God I'm given, God is very much in the world, and this is again very nearly a direct quote from God to Jerry. I am both same as you and other than you. And God goes on to explain the reason for both. There's an aspect in which God is the same as each and every one of us, is the same as the nature outside us. But that's not the full story, and that by itself would not be an adequate story. God also needs, this is again a quote of God to Jerry, quote or paraphrase, a self requires another self. And I'm told, as told in prayer, that applies to God as well. In fact, that was the context of my being told that. It wasn't an abstract proposition. But you might say, why, if God is so self-sufficient, why are there other people in the world at all? Why are there other selves in the world? And part of the story is that, like all of us, God grows through the interaction. And love is a central story of the universe, and love requires difference. It requires aspects of identity, of merging, of empathy, of mutual involvement that almost comes to unification sometimes. But it also requires difference. And that's how we grow, and that's how we're able to show love and care and concern and compassion for others. That requires that there be others. So God is both, in one respect, the same as us, and in all traditions that I can think of, there's some aspect, some recognition of the fact that God is in your heart, that God is inside. But there's generally also recognition that you are not simplicator God. God has a role somewhat different from yours, and you interact with God. You take direction from God. You try to get your will in sync with the divine will, and that's a lot of the meaning of life. In fact, I'm told one time I tend to relate to God often as trying to do what God wants me to do, and I think that's very important. In some ways, that's the most important thing, is obedience, which I'm told is a kind of transformation. You start transforming from your petty will to something larger and more expansive. But I'm also told it's not just a matter of following orders, like a soldier who's told march here, march there. It's like two singers doing a harmony together. And it's really to be in sync with God, in harmony with God, having your path match God's path, almost your rhythm match God's rhythm. And does that make sense to you, Gary?
The question that crosses my mind at this time is that had this personal experience. Can others also have similar experiences with God?
Well, I'm surprised to find the number of people who have heard a voice. Usually it's briefer than me. It's not a whole book, but I think that's because God wanted me to write a book. And so, we had these lengthy discussions that then at one point came to an end. I knew that, okay, it's time to put this together into a book and get it published. But I've encountered other people who do hear a voice, but also I've come very much to the belief, I'm told over and over in the book that God comes to us in many ways. Let me just quote a little bit of that.
Yes.
I communicate through prayer. This is God to Jerry.
Okay.
I communicate through prayer, through dreams, through insights that seem like one's own thoughts, through hunches and intimations and intuitions. I am present in the human heart and speak to people directly. Directly does not mean simply or literally or in a loud voice. People must learn to listen, to heed. That requires openness of heart and sensitive attunement to my voice, to my urgings. And one more quote.
Yes.
From elsewhere in the book. I am a God who whispers. It is not difficult to hear me. It is not, as some say, that I am hidden. Far from it. I am not in hiding. I am everywhere, right in front of their eyes. But they have to choose to see, to hear, to heed. People's hearts are usually closed. The voice language occurs there, but as you can see, the ways God is accessible to us goes far beyond the voice. And God says I'm everywhere, right in front of their eyes. We can also see God in nature. And I don't mean just glorious sunsets that are inspiring, but a little frog jumping in the pond. The divine. If you encounter nature in the right way, I remember Martin Buber talking about saying "thou" to nature. Addressing nature in personal language. If you can see God there, and you can. What is the voice of conscience? Where do we think that comes from? That's not biochemistry. That's not your DNA. That's God planting that sense of right and wrong in you. And it doesn't, we call it the voice of conscience. That doesn't mean that it speaks out loud out there. But it kind of works a lot like a voice that speaks because you're considering doing something, and it's as though another inner voice says, oh, no, that's the wrong way to go. And we all have those moments. Or there's some positive obligation. Here's someone you could help. You're kind of in a hurry, but it's as if an inner voice says, no, you need to stop and help the person. And you can be a little late to whatever you're going to. So that's how that works. But we have to, part of it is that we're, with intuitions and these kind of almost mystical insights one sometimes has in special moments that might be in nature, they might be in some kind of worship, they might be listening to certain music. You have to recognize, well, this is God. You are relating to God at those moments, and pay attention to them. Not, just sort of put them aside, oh, wasn't that a nice concert, or wasn't that a beautiful scene? But, what's God telling me here? What's the meaning of this? What does this point my life toward? One way, yeah.
Is it possible that we don't hear God because our minds are being filled with a lot of self-concern?
Well, yes, absolutely, absolutely. I'm often my sense from the totality of my encounters with God is that we mainly have to get the junk out of the way, the distractions, and the junk includes junk inside and junk outside. And a lot of the junk inside is, of course, we're concerned with our own ego, with our own appearance, with our own ambitions, with our own greed, our own lust. So it's a very long list of the great distractions of life where we're not normally thinking of, what is my purpose in this life? I must be following it. We're thinking of all these other things, or just what's going on tomorrow. Oh, the phone's ring. I got to call.
Did you come to a point in your life? You mentioned about meeting Abigail when you were letting go, or you felt that there was room to actually hear God speak to you?
I personally was not aware of a preparation there. When I prayed about it, God told me He had been preparing me, but I think I had some traits that were helpful all along. I've always very much wanted to believe what was true, not there's an awful big desire to believe the beliefs that make you comfortable, and I've always wanted to really be as truthful as I could, and that's a kind of open trait. You know, that's where you rise above your own ego projections of the world and try to take in how things really are. But no, there was not. I think, if anything, it was just, you know, what were my first two prayers? The first was a prayer of gratitude. You know, and gratitude is a profound human response to reality. If you say, you know, if you have a certain kind of philosophy, perhaps closer to the philosophy I used to have, gratitude barely makes sense, especially for just good things like love coming into your life. But obviously, the love did affect me in a way that enabled me not to worry about, do I believe there's a recipient to this prayer, not to worry about, do I believe it even makes sense to say gratitude for a good thing, you know, why isn't it just good luck or something like that, or coincidence, you know, it just happened one day, things happen, but I did have that openness, and then the seeking for guidance. I don't know what prompted me to pray about it, but obviously I in some way had shifted my soul orientation in a way that I hadn't been aware of, and prayed for guidance. The main prayer I ever pray, most people pray for things for themselves, and they say God answered or didn't answer the prayer, is whether they got what they wanted. But I almost always pray, 99% of the time, for guidance. What do you want me to do,
right,
Lord? And I suppose that's arising above ego. But as I say, I've never thought of it that way, and I've never felt myself to be less ego-ridden than the next person.
And you were a lifelong agnostic, which means you lived life basically just trying to be a good human being, and
yeah,
you weren't thinking of God in particular, you know,
yeah,
in your life, like a lot of people, even though they may call themselves spiritual or religious, you know, some people will just use that as a, you know, these are one of my the clothing that I wear. This is how I want you to see me. This is how I want to see myself.
Exactly.
So
that's a good point.
Yeah. So, are you a seeker? This is a call. This is a call for us to find out what God is about. Your book is God, an Autobiography, as told to a philosopher, and the website is godanautibiography.com. And Jerry Martin wrote this book, although you wrote the book. And
well, it's 80% or so God.
Yeah.
but I tell the story.
You tell the story.
All of this. Yes.
Exactly, through God's words to you, right?
Yes, exactly.
And did you have? How did you?
No, and I should add, it's available on Amazon.com.
Yeah.
And whatever the parallel thing, I keep forgetting the name, IndieBound or something.
Yeah.
That goes to your local bookstore.
Right.
Support them.
Okay. Well, thank you. In the website, you'll get indications where to buy the book, right?
That's right. That's
okay.
Right. But what were you asking, Gary?
And also, there's a lot of blogs and you can actually contribute. And I just signed up for your newsletter, by the way.
Oh, so, wonderful.
Yeah. And
I love hearing from people.
Yes. So, we want to have a conversation here. Neil Donald Walsh wrote the book Conversations with God.
Yes.
And that became hugely popular. Mm-hmm. And people want to know about God because God has been called many things. We do know that what we say God is, or is some kind of higher power. We know that, and it's a power that, or an energy that a power that we can connect with and draw upon through our intention and an openness to receive.
Yes, exactly.
An openness and in prayer. So I want to talk with you more about this, Jerry, right after our short station break. Okay.
Very good, Gary.
Thank you very much. Jerry Martin is our guest. His book, God and Autobiography, is told to a philosopher. And here we go.
The best hospitals in the world aren't necessarily the ones that charge the most. In fact, Shriners Hospitals for Children have never charged for any of the medical care or services they provide, and they're recognized the world over as among the very best when it comes to helping kids with problems of the bones, joints, or muscles, or with severe burns. There's a Shriners Hospital helping kids from this area. Call 1-800-237-5055 for more information.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in today to In the Spirit. My name is Gary, and you're listening to WRPI Troy. I want to thank our first guest, Amy McTeer, and now we have Jerry Martin, who through him, a book was written, God and Autobiography, as told to a philosopher. It's out right now, and the website is godandautobiography.com. Jerry Martin, he is with us right now. Hello, Jerry.
Hello, Gary.
Yes. So a lot of now God is important to people. We know that. Look at all the religions that were formed, and we all, a lot of us seem to have, even though you were a lifelong agnostic, many of us feel a thirst for knowing a higher being. Where do you think that thirst comes from? Does God address that?
I don't know that I ask exactly that question, but it's clear in the course of the book. I mean, I was led to read the kind of foundational sacred text of various religions, the sort of ancient texts themselves, to see God speaking through to the different cultures, and And it's just very striking because you look at the most primitive culture, everyone is relating to God, and often in profound ways. And one of the questions for me as a philosopher is, how is that possible? That everybody every time seems to have some sense of the divine presence, though of course it's while quite real, it's not something people can quite get their hands on or package, or if they simplify it, they're distorting it. But there is a orientation. I guess this is what I've come to think, that after all, we and God are in this universe together. It's quite natural, just as our eyes pick up light and enable us to see, that you might say our souls are oriented toward the divine, and seek the divine, and when functioning properly, are open to the divine, to let the divine in. And I've come to think people go around seeking, how can I find God? How can I talk to God? How can I hear God? How can I see God somewhere, or have some experience on a high mountain? But I've come to the conclusion it's best just to try to not worry about the God end so much as your own end, and having an open soul, and being loving and compassionate, and putting aside what I call the idolatry of belief. We're so attached sometimes to a rigid set of beliefs, but that's fine. We need beliefs to operate in the world, but hold them lightly and let come in whatever comes in, and have some patience. If God wants to talk to you, God will talk to you. If God wants to instead put a task in your path that you may not even recognize as divinely put, but it may have been just the thing you need to move your life forward, then accept it. And if it's a challenge, it means you need to take up the challenge. And if it's, like for me, God put a new love into my life, and and that's a challenge too. It's a reward and a wonderful thing, but it's also you have to pick up the challenge of love, the challenge of, as we had, of living in two different cities, and every loving relationship has challenges precisely because love bridges differences, and the differences are real, and in part have to be overcome, and in part have to be negotiated and taken into account, in a realistic way. But that's how we live life. Life is a great drama.
Well, it's true, but I'm also talking about the thirst, the soul thirst,
yes,
that we have within us. Not so much how we're connecting to it or making it a reality, but or a reality to us, whatever form that takes. But the actual feeling of wanting God in your life, or God is real.
Yeah.
I grew up as a last name is Goldberg, and that's it was a Jewish man wanting to marry a Catholic girl during wartime. And
my wife is Jewish.
exactly, and was told that, well, you can't marry her unless you raise your children Catholic. So that happened, but I had a great thirst for God, and it wasn't because I had God drummed into me, and I recognized the difference. Because I really didn't connect with, even though I went through all the communion, the confession, all the commandments, there was something underneath that was real to me, some kind of thirst for God, and it was a personal thirst for God. And even after I left Catholicism, or years afterwards, left the institution, that thirst stayed with me, and it translated, and now I feel it through my connection with chanting and meditation. And I'm still working on strengthening that connection. And like we said earlier, there's so many distractions in the world, and I fall prey to many of them. So I have to keep on getting up on my feet and dusting off and starting again.
We all do.
Yeah, it's like, how did I screw up? When a lot of times when things are going so well, you take it for granted. So I'm very much interested in this, having a personal relationship with that being that we call God, and so whatever name we wish to call it. For instance, I like to call God Krishna.
Yes.
because I chant whenever we chant Krishna. I feel the love in my heart, because
I understand,
and I feel God is love, and that and that God brings the love out of me, and I have the recognition that I am one with all, and that and I'm to be of service in the world. Those are the things that I've learned from my experience of relating to God.
Wonderful. That's a profound reflection right there that you've given us.
And when did this happen with you, when you first heard the voice?
When did what happen?
When you first heard God's voice, how long ago was that?
Oh, well, actually, I'm always embarrassed by that question, because for several years I refused the assignment, but it's been over 10 years now.
Over 10 years.
It then took a long time to make these prayers into a readable book.
So in the meantime, before you started making it a book,
yes,
what was your relationship with God?
The first relationship was, as I say, gratitude, seeking guidance, then asking questions, and then receiving commands that I followed. And there's something about obedience very early in the book, because some of the commands didn't seem to make sense, and it seemed more like a training in obedience. And I think some of the gurus and other types of spiritual masters do the same thing with their I don't know what the right word is, disciples we'll call them, their pupils, is they say, do this, do that, do the other thing. None of it makes sense to the pupil, but it's a kind of training, and part of the training is just a training in rising above your own desires, inclinations, distractions, and even your own, sense of how to get ahead in life and your career, this kind of thing. It was irrelevant to that. None of it undermined that. It wasn't that bizarre, but they just seemed kind of meaningless. But I went through and I kept obeying them, and I guess that probably was the right thing for me to do. But I think you're quite right to rise, to somehow orient yourself away from the daily distractions and the other urges. And part of it, and you do this through music, is to seek at least some time. Our world is so cluttered and so much going on. We all live in kind of hyperspace and hypertime these days. You just see people texting everywhere, the grocery store line, wherever. They're always doing three things at the same time. This is how modern life is.
So your relationship with God before you wrote the book, I'm still trying to get a handle on it a little bit.
Yeah, what the background was.
Yeah, the background. Did you, how many times a day did you hear the voice? Was it often? Did you have a casual conversation with this being? What form did it take, etc.?
I would mainly ask questions. I would ask questions about what I was supposed to do that day. A lot of the prayers, I'd kind of start the day with prayer, but it would just be a quick prayer. And sometimes the voice would speak to me when I wasn't praying, and would even interrupt something. And then I started asking, of course, these questions that were in my mind. First, they were Christian-type questions, and I asked about some of the classic theological doctrines about God, and that's where I kept getting answers that seemed that the kind of classic theological doctrines were, well, not exactly. Each answer was, kind of a near miss. The doctrine was a near miss, and so I followed it that way at the same time that I had a full-time job and so forth. And
did you feel love for this being? And if you didn't, how did you? We're brought into this world feeling love for our parents and for those that are close to us. Did you feel the need to have a loving relationship with this being, or did that develop over time?
Well, I think the relationship was kind of loving from the beginning, but I didn't dwell on that. It wasn't.
Right.
I know a lot of spiritual literature even talks about the quest for adoration, just spend all your time loving God. But that was never my guidance, and
or feeling a loving connection.
But I always felt the loving connection.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, exactly. That was, I think, implicit at the beginning. In I mean, the voice, the three characteristics the voice had at the beginning that made me not doubt the voice, really, was it was too real, benign, and authoritative for me to doubt it.
Yeah.
It had those three characteristics. Benign includes loving, of course. The loving, compassionate, it was a voice of a being who cared about me. And one of the messages in the book is that sometimes people make God so transcendent that they don't feel that God loves them in a personal way. God loves the world, that God doesn't love Jerry and Gary and Sue, right?
Right.
But what I'm told is no, God loves us just the way a parent loves each child. A parent can have 9 kids. They love still each one individually, not generically as, I love, quote, my kids. God has an intense love of and interest in each and every one of us, wants to partner with us in our lives, but sends the signals in a rather faint way as we see it. So it's very hard for us to kind of know. And I think the things you're talking about, where you need to find some quiet time. I mean, the quiet time can be with music, but it's got to be the music that enables you to get quiet within yourself and not be distracted.
It's a relationship. Like, you would know whatever you're doing, God is with you.
Yes.
That's the kind of relationship that I would like to cultivate myself.
Yes.
Having that being connection all the time, wherever I'm doing radio, walking along, driving my car, whatever I'm doing, I'm feeling it. I'm connecting with it.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, it's my life. It's not like a part when I'm praying or when I'm meditating. It's every time. It's every moment. So
I sometimes liken it to gravity.
Yeah.
How often do you think about gravity? Very rarely.
Exactly.
Right?
So,
but at every moment, your whole being is acting in light of your belief in gravity, right?
Right.
It's a frame of your life and of your actions.
Yes.
You know you're not going to float off into space. You know you better not step off the cliff, the second floor balcony, and so on. And belief in God is like that. It's and can even be tacit, and that's why a person can have a rather deep belief in God and partnership with God and not even realize it.
Yes, it's something to explore.
Yes.
Yeah. I want to talk to you more. We're running out of time. We'll set another date, Jerry. If you would like,
that's a good idea.
Have another conversation about this. It's we set a little groundwork here on our first conversation, and I will email you, and we'll set up another date if you'd like that.
Yeah, that would be very, very nice, because we've just opened some doors here and haven't really quite walked through them.
That's right, and we want to walk through them, and we want our listeners to walk through them with us. So, and we're going to people can find out about the guests on my program by emailing me, and I can send you a newsletter in the spirit 2424 at yahoo.com. In the spirit 2424 at yahoo.com. Also, you can go to find out when our next program will be with Jerry. You can go to godandautobiography.com because he posts it on the website. And so, Jerry, I want to thank you for.
I think my helper is recording this program, so I'm hoping the actual recording of this program will appear. We'll see how that works. The technicals.
Well, I hope it works, because many of my interviews do get on people's websites, and I'd be very happy to have this one on your website for people to hear. Some people are not available to hear this live, and we stream it live, but we don't archive it. So it's great when it is, and when it's put on the website of the person who we're having an interview with. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you, Gary.
And if you'd final words to our listeners, would you like to express?
Well, I hope they will join this journey. God in Autobiography, is told a philosopher, It's both a kind of revelation from God, but it's a personal journey of me, and as I believe, there's something in this book for each reader. That's just my own sense of the book. And so there's a spiritual journey for the reader in this book to find, you might say, which are the insights that helped that reader relate to God better.
Beautiful. Thank you. And I appreciate, perhaps maybe we will even have some callers for the next show.
Oh, that'd be fun. Yeah, I'd love to hear what's going on with people.
Yes, thank you. Jerry, if you'd like to stay on the line, I'll speak with you off air.